So let's talk about the child-parent psychotherapy triangle. And I'm going to start with the right-hand side of the triangle. That's often where family members start. When they come into treatment, they're talking about the child's behavior problems, that this child is acting out, that they're hitting, that they're screaming, that they're depressed, that they're not sleeping. You guys have heard this, right? And I think as caregivers, we feel this, right? These are the things that bring us down. What we want to do as mental health providers and as a mental health system, though, is not jump to really saying, let's fix this. What we want to start off with is let's understand this. And that's where the left-hand side of the triangle comes. And I like to think of this as a path, right? So you think about how did this family and this child get here? And in CPP, we have a mantra, which is do not target for change what you do not yet understand. And so when people are coming in talking about the right-hand side of the triangle, I really want to listen to them. I want to understand what this is like for them. And then I really want to think about how do I understand the experience that brought them here today? And I like to call this a bridge of understanding, right? So that you're bridging the symptoms with the experience. And that often is an amazing intervention. And at the bottom of this triangle is the way that grown-ups will help the child, taking into account the child's history. So for us, it's how treatment will help, how we will partner with caregivers to help, how we will involve other caregivers like childcare providers, child welfare, and schools. So that's the core of the CPP triangle, but it's very important to remember what goes around the triangle. And what goes around the triangle is all the strengths, all the positive steps, all the great things that families have done to support this child, including really wanting help and coming into treatment and being open and talking to us and sharing. So that in a nutshell is the child-parent psychotherapy triangle. As clinicians, when we're creating the CPP triangle, we may have many different versions of the triangle. There's the version that we hold inside that we co-created with our supervisor. As we took all of the rich material that caregivers shared with us during the assessment and engagement phase, it's really our conceptualization of how do we understand what they've been through and how it affects them, and then what we might do to help. And then when we go into the feedback session with the caregiver, we co-create a triangle with them. And we think about what they've learned through the assessment and engagement phase. We think together about how we'll open the door to the child about what they've been through and what we'll do together when they come into treatment. The third version is the version that we do with the child. That version often has the same content, but you might not say everything. For example, if we have a child who's had multiple moves, and lived in multiple homes, and we know from all of the questionnaires that we've asked that this is a child who unfortunately has been harmed by adults, it would be really overwhelming to do it as a list. The other thing that you're really going to want to think about is modality. So as grown-ups, we like to use a lot of words. With children, it's often really good to do it with toys.
When you were little, you used to live over here. And we don't know what things were like. But we know that when you were a baby, you got hurt. And after that, you moved. And it might have been very scary for a baby to move. And now you live here. But you might worry sometimes about whether you'll move again. And you might worry when grown-ups get angry. And you don't like it when people's voices get loud. And when you get angry, sometimes you hit. Your mama now is going to come so that you can show us what things were like when you lived in all these different places. When you get angry, we can help mama help you to think about what we do when we have like little volcanoes inside our bodies.
So that right there, I hope you heard the elements of the CPP triangle, where we've talked about experience, the multiple moves, we've talked about how it affects this little kid, and we've opened the door to really thinking about what we might do together as a team, really, when we come to therapy. It's also really important to think about the cultural group triangle or the historical trauma triangle. So we're often thinking about your cultural group has had an experience. And sometimes that experience has been of genocide, of colonialism, of slavery, of racism, of oppression, and that impacts you. It would impact anybody. Treatment is a place where we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that oftentimes the history of our cultural group is one where it makes sense that you wouldn't feel safe being with me and talking to me. And I, as a clinician, may choose to acknowledge that openly to you, but at the very least, I hold it inside myself so that when I'm working with someone, if I think, oh, I'm a mental health clinician, you should love coming to me, sometimes I really have to pause and say no. Let me wait and think about the history of our groups. And sometimes our groups are our racial groups or our cultural groups, and I have to remember that within the histories of our people, it's possible that my people have harmed your people or your people have harmed my people. And sometimes it's actually the history of your cultural group with regards to a system that I'm part of. If you view me as allied with child welfare and your family's had a bad experience, it would make total sense that you don't trust me. And sometimes as mental health providers, we use words like the person is resistant to treatment. And what I would say is, I don't know if they're resistant to treatment. What it is that they don't feel safe. If you look at the history that their family had, it makes complete sense that they don't feel safe. And so it's very important that I acknowledge that and respect that, and that I slowly earn the right to be somebody who you can trust enough to tell your story to.